My name is Julie Steenson. I am with the City of Kansas City, and sort of to close out the day and about all the cool 21st century tools we're using, I'm going to talk about a 19th century tool that we're using in a 21st century way in Kansas City. So this is all about our citizen survey, and what I want to cover today is really more the nuts and bolts of surveys. So the administration of a survey, question selection, celebrating successes when you have big increases in survey satisfaction. And then also I'm going to try to weave in some stories about how we use our citizen survey in our overarching data-driven approach in Kansas City. We call it KC Stat, but it's very much embedding data into performance improvement and operations of the city. So what we won't cover are actual survey results. So I will a little bit, it's again weaved in throughout the presentation, but if you want to see our actual results, you can go to kcmo.gov/data, or we also have a dashboard. It's just, if you just Google KC Stat, it will pop up. So data's out there if you want to see it, but really I want to focus on what is a survey and how are we using it. So what we look at, or what we consider our survey, is really just our highest level outcome-oriented metric. It is our aggregate voice of the customer. And while I recognize that each of our rows of data that we get from our survey are individual people with individual opinions, the real power of a citizen survey is at that aggregate level when you roll all that together. And our survey was started back really in the year 2000. Our city auditor was in charge of it at that time. And one of the things he said when I talked to him this week about, why did you even do this in the first place, is that they wanted to get inside the public's mind, and they wanted to try to start being proactive about what was happening in the community and if there were emerging issues that needed to be addressed instead of always being reactive. So in another way, or saying it in another way, we wanted a way for our data to have a perspective on our citizens' voice that was a little bit beyond and a little more empirical than just that loudest voice. And I'm all about the detractors. I love some of those disruptors who come in and just kind of blow apart our assumptions about government. But sometimes those voices need to be tested against something quantitative. And that's what we feel like our citizen survey does. And I really want to point out this last box. It's kind of a blue color there under the survey data. Our survey also gives every service that the city offers that is public facing, gives it a fair shot to be rated. We have a lot of constituents who come in and have very strong ideas, or they have very strong advocacy groups that are behind them for particular city services. But there's some services that don't have an advocacy group. I've never gone to a budget hearing and had somebody come in and said, we got to slurry seal that street. I'm here, I got 30 people behind me. They're in there for other things. They're in there maybe for bike infrastructure, maybe schools, other things that are related to the street infrastructure that can't happen without street infrastructure. But without our survey, we wouldn't have kind of a counter to some of those loud voices. So we really use it in that way, as a way to either test or even support and really add momentum to, we've had a really big push, as I said, street infrastructure, on-street bike infrastructure. We've got a real push in Kansas City to become a bike-friendly city. And our survey is starting to show that that's really important to people. So to reiterate, the timeline, we began the survey administration in its current format in the year 2000. We had done some surveys back in the 80s and 90s, and those had been done in-house. They had been done by our city auditor's office, more as just a gut check. They were sporadic, and they did them just setting up a phone bank. It was really great, but the data was not as useful because it wasn't done consistently. So you couldn't really get anything that was trending over time or have large sets of data that you could analyze. So we began a relationship with a third-party contractor. And that sort of launched us into this idea of doing an annual survey. And that's kind of where we've gotten, or how we've gotten to where we are today. In the year 2000, my office, the Office of Performance Management, took over administration of the survey, working with that third-party contractor, really as an effort to align the survey data with all the other data and metrics and everything else going into the system of KC Stat, we felt like the city auditor was doing a great job of administration, but they were not necessarily doing anything with the results from the survey. So we wanted to have a way, the city manager wanted a way to make sure that we were incorporating it into other systems. And I do have to give the auditor mad props, and this is kind of a warning. Setting up a survey is pretty difficult, making sure statistical validity, and that's what they are great at, city auditors. So if you are ever considering a citizen survey, get your auditor involved. They're gonna make sure your survey is strong. 14-15, we've gone through another round of revisions. Anytime we do a revision, and I'll get into this a little bit deeper, but anytime we do a revision, there's a very strong purpose. We don't take survey instrument revisions lightly. So a little bit about our survey. We have about 467,000 people in the boundaries of Kansas City, Missouri. We have a sample of 9,000, 46% response rate. So that's pretty high. That gives us the ability to really infer the opinions of our citizens and do a lot of cross-tabulation with the results. Pretty low margin of error. We do make sure that it's balanced against the census so that we have a nice representative sample. Our surveys are first mailed, so that's totally old school, but that has a link to it. People can take it online, and if in the sample the contractor has not heard from those people, whether it's from mail or taken online, they'll then follow up with phone calls. And then the survey contractor will continue making phone calls until they get it balanced to the census. And what I think is really cool is even though we added the online option, because we just felt like that was a necessity these days, we actually have only seen like a 3 to 5% response online. So I don't know what's going on. We've been recently talking about, is our form too hard? Is there something going on with the interface? So we've got to explore that, but most people are still taking the pen and paper survey or taking it online or over the phone, which I don't know, it's kind of astounding to me these days. But our response rate hasn't suffered for it, so something's there. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that internal versus external administration. I think either is great, as long as you're doing something. A survey in any format is great. One of the reasons we chose to do a contract and go out for bid on this and seek out some external help really was all about trust. When we first started doing the survey, and even today, we wanted to make sure that our citizens didn't feel like the city was invading their privacy or we were going to release their information. We wanted to make sure there was anonymity. Having that third-party contractor has sort of helped with that. It also helps establish trust with our elected officials. There have been times where the methodology has been questioned. And you can see here, this is one of those times. Everyone really is a critic of a survey. Everyone will be a survey expert when you present results. We frequently have the question, I've never received a survey. No one I know has ever received a survey. You obviously don't send them to people in my neighborhood. And while there are actually people in neighborhoods I would like to exclude from my survey, we don't. And it's just a reminder that everybody's going to have a better methodology than you do. And having that contractor relationship, we have him come to our meetings sometimes and talk about, this is statistically valid, this is blah, 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 we balance it, so on and so forth. And that usually soothes people. They feel like this is a survey expert talking about surveys, so they can be trusted. And I think I'll have a few of these orange boxes throughout the presentation that are just major tips. My colleague Kate's here, the one actually speaking in the microphone, because as you can tell from the look on my face, I cannot handle that question anymore. I don't have a good response to it anymore other than you're an idiot. So, but they're not. That's a legitimate question. But I always let her answer that question because, as you can tell, I can't answer it. Benchmarking is also another real advantage of having an external contractor. So we have obviously our results there, that satisfaction with these services or with Kansas City as a place to live and maintenance of city streets. And we have the ability through the contractor, they go out and do random samples of citizens in cities with 250,000 population or more. So if you live in one of those cities, there is a chance someday you may get surveyed by my survey contractor so that I can create a chart like this. And the other point in this is, and why we love the benchmarking. Sometimes your results may look really bad. 27% satisfaction, that is something we're grappling with, and we don't like that result. But in the universe, we're not going for 100%, just nationally. People's opinions of street infrastructure are just pretty low. And so if we're trying to get to a national average, we're only going for like 45 to 50%. We can go beyond that, and that would be great. But if we're just trying to meet benchmarks, that's where we're headed. So benchmarking helps us establish those targets that often we lack in government. Also, we feel like the contractor and the staff there have had to lay down some really hard truth for us. We had a year back in fiscal year 2014, where we had a lot of increases on the survey, like unbelievable. We didn't believe the results. We ran the frequencies, we sent them to the auditor, we sent them everywhere and said, run this, spot check this, there's something going on. Almost every question saw an increase in satisfaction. This can't be right. And finally, after communicating with the contractor and his staff, he called and he's like, you guys, you've been putting emphasis on the survey. You've been improving your city services. You've been communicating. Guess what? This is real. You're really improving people's perception of the city. And so without that third-party voice to reassure us that we weren't crazy, I think we have really missed an opportunity to tell some positive stories about what the city is doing and how they're improving the quality of services for our citizens. There was also a moment, taking a little bit further back, when we started our relationship with the contractor in my office, where the first meeting, he walked in and he sat the survey report that they help us produce down on the table, and he said, hey, you know what, you guys, you may have some service problems, but what you really have here in Kansas City is a brand problem. Your brand equity sucks. And we were like, okay, how do you know that? And he's like, well, you've got a 5-point scale. And people who say a 1 or a 5 on any individual question on a citizen survey, they either love you or really hate you. Because to get somebody on a survey psychologically to put a 1 or a 5, they have to have had a really impactful experience with you, or they have to have known someone that had a very impactful experience, positive or negative. And so we started concentrating a little bit on that, and really we've ramped up a lot of our communications, our communication staff. We've also rebranded. We have a new moniker, which is the KC down there at the bottom, changed our logo, because we want to have a city truck drive down your street and you feel good about it instead of rolling your eyes and saying, well, here comes the sucky city again. And you can see in some of the areas, the example I have here is our 3-in-1 agents. We've done a lot of work with them, both at the agent level and also improving access to our 3-in-1 services. And we have a 30% very satisfied in that area, which is one of our highest, which aggregates out to a pretty high, when you combine 4s and 5s, satisfied, very satisfied, to a pretty high percentage. And so we're pretty proud of that because we put a lot of effort in that area. So another thing that we do, kind of based on our own needs, but also a recommendation from our contractor, is we did this almost a decade ago, where we started asking the questions on a quarterly basis. So we take that 9,000 sample size and we break it down into 4 quarters. And what we really use that for in my office is that ongoing monitoring. So if we see something in second quarter start to tank, we know that we need to somehow adjust what's going on in that particular service area or the communication around that service area. We report out at the city council and also to the public at the aggregate annual level, but having that quarterly data helps us to just sort of see what's emerging, maybe what trends are happening. The other thing we can do, honestly, is we ask more questions this way. So with 4 quarters, we're able to take 2 of the quarters, first and third, and ask one set of questions on one of the pages. And then second and fourth quarter, we ask another set of questions. Those ones at the very bottom in that box, those are the ones that we hold very sacred. We ask all 4 quarters. We do that because those are some of the areas we know we need the most data for in order to cross-tabulate or to do geographic analysis. So there are areas, the core areas and services the city provides, that we do all 4 quarters. And we also, we wanted to limit it to 4 pages because more pages cost more to administer. And also, if you get much beyond 4 pages of survey questions, you're just gonna make people mad. They're not gonna want to take your survey ever again. They're gonna tell everyone else they know never to take their survey. So it was kind of a cost benefit for us. We also like quarterly because we can self-adjust for some seasonality. So as you can see here, this is satisfaction with quality of city services. And satisfaction meaning those ratings of 4 or 5. And as you can see, something's happened definitely in the last few years where people are happier in second quarter. That's fall and winter. I mean, there's a lot of theories for that. We see this almost across all questions where people in Kansas City are just happier. I'd like to think maybe it's the Kansas City Royals. Maybe when the survey was released, the Chiefs won their one game of the season. I don't know, but something's going on there. So if we surveyed in the fall or winter, we would think, hey, we're not doing too bad. This is awesome. But we'd be overinflating our citizen satisfaction, which in the way we use our survey would not be helpful at all. We don't do this to pump sunshine. We do it so we can use it to improve services. And if it was higher than it actually is, we wouldn't actually be able to do anything. So we look at the quarterly as a way to adjust for some of that seasonality. So there are also other really cool benefits to quarterly administration. Snow removal is one of those things that does have a little bit of a seasonal trend. And we actually had the advantage back in 2013. These are the 2 lines are snow removal on major streets, residential streets. We released the survey just by happenstance the week after one of our biggest snowfalls in Kansas City history. And we thought, oh, this is going to be terrible. You know, we were out there, we were plowing snow, and we thought this is going to be pretty bad. But the other thing we did, instead of really enhancing operations, we had a hunch based on the past data that what was really going on is that people were dissatisfied with, or not as satisfied as they could be, with the way we were communicating about our snow removal policies, about where the plows had been, just everything about snow removal operations. And so when the snow started falling, we took to Twitter, press releases, public events, any way we could get the word out about, hey, park your car on the right side of the street. That way we can get our plow down your residential street. Or we will be there once the last snowflake falls. We just started communicating just as much as we possibly could. And when we got the survey results back, we saw a huge bump in survey terminology, a huge bunch in citizen satisfaction. And honestly, since that point, you see kind of it drops a little in that fourth quarter as it started to warm up and the snow melted. People forgot what a great job we did. But at the aggregate annual level, that has actually never gone down, and we're exceeding national benchmarks on snow removal, which is for a city of like 6,000 lane miles of street, that's pretty amazing. We also look at it, again, as a way to identify some of those communication gaps. I've just got a couple more examples. Animal control is another one that we feel like we have both some service, we've got service issues, but we've tried to improve those over time. And we're still not seeing increases in citizen satisfaction like you would think. So the indicators in service level and satisfaction from users through 3-in-1, it all looks good, but it's not translating to perception. And so we're working on how we continue to communicate about that. We've actually recently, and I should have put it on here, split the questions out. Animal control and animal shelter operations are 2 different animals for us, pun intended. And the shelter operations, I think, has been propping up this, because we have a no-kill shelter. And people love that, and they're very good at what they do, and they do great PR. So we think that shelter has been really propping up this 42%, and first quarter sort of indicates that that's true, that our animal control operations, the satisfaction level is actually even lower than 42%. So we're gonna have to work with that and see what's going on. Street lighting, same thing. We have good indicators as far as how quickly we replace the bulbs when they burn out, and we've got a really robust street lighting system. People aren't as satisfied as you think they would be. So we think that's also a perception and communication gap. So before we move on, I just wanted to maybe open it up to anybody to ask questions about survey, like how we administer it or any of our details or anything. Yeah.
My questions are on cost. Like, how much does this end up costing you per year?
Yeah, I don't think our contractor would mind me saying, like, it's $55,000 to $60,000 a year. So we look at it as basically the cost of a data analyst, So, and they do a lot of the compilation of the data that I don't want to do myself. So.
Follow up. The politicians who are, pulling the purse strings a bit, have they ever been against this because any dollar they spend is not spent somewhere else, or have they been open to it? What strategy do you use against the people who aren't
You know what, I would say in the past there would just sort of an indifference. You know, it was something we did, survey, okay. What I feel like has happened over the last 4 or 5 years is that's indifference has gone, or it's gone from indifference to actually they're talking about the data. You know, I've been in meetings before where I was just a fly on the wall and somebody says like, well, satisfaction with park maintenance is really up this year, you guys, you know, and so we've seen it, or conversely, you know, that's really trending down. We need to consider putting more money into that. So I think they're starting to use it in their talking points, which, I mean, I fill with joy when I hear one of them talking about the survey and using the data, because I mean, why else would we do it, you know? Yeah.
Getting managers to open up and want to get data back right is a rate kind of how the city's doing. Was there any resistance? And you talked about the council member standpoint, but the internal workers and city managers, was there any stopping points there that you guys could overcome?
That is a work in progress. You know, I'm going to address one of the huge barriers we face in a little bit under question selection. But I think because it's layered in with a lot of other things, it's not just we do a survey, we report out on it, and we, sort of, put people on the spot about the data. We layer it with a lot of their service level data. So as I said, I think that helps with buy-in. That way, it's not the only thing we're measuring you by. It's just it's a voice of the customer for the services you're providing. So I think it's an ongoing. There are some areas where there's a lot of buy-in and people use the data. They've set targets for the data. Our Parks Department set a target for park maintenance for the citizen survey and have done things to try to impact that. Other areas, it's like, yeah, that's cool. I don't know what to do with that. So that's just a constant work in progress. And as I said, we embed it into KC Stat. And so it's just something we talk about constantly. There's not a sentence out of my mouth that doesn't include like, well, citizen survey says, So it's just a constant battle to buy in, Yeah. Yeah, and actually, the survey, if you go out to our website, again, you can find it somewhere. It's our citywide business plan, actually. The citizen survey is, for the most part across the board, one of the metrics to measure whether we're moving in the right direction on our 5-year financial plan and citywide business plan. So the survey provides the data to give us that level of metrics. And then conversely, we use a lot of the prioritization in the survey. And I have a couple of examples of that to help us decide maybe where our resources should go. Yeah?
Have you ever looked at different types of constituents, so whether they're a taxpayer, a resident, a citizen, a non-citizen, has that been part of your discussion?
So anyone, I'm not sure I understand your question, but anyone that takes the survey would be a resident of Kansas City, Missouri. And so we wouldn't have any surveys from outside of the metro. It would be interesting, though, to know how people that live in the suburban or exurban or wherever feel about our city.
So for example, if someone works in your area, is technically a resident, how do they have any opportunity?
They wouldn't have an opportunity on this survey, no. We do have a business survey that asks business owners whether they live in KCMO or not, and that's actually really interesting because I think probably what you're alluding to, people who don't live in Kansas City but own businesses in Kansas City aren't as happy with what we're doing, so yeah.
Is it purely anonymous, or it might not be logistically possible from a staffing perspective, but if somebody wanted a response to concerns in the survey, are you able to touch back to them or get their email address for further engagement, or is it all just strictly anonymous?
This one's our anonymous tool. People put their addresses for the most part, and where they don't put their addresses, the contractor will put to the intersection based off the sample. But no, this it's not as much of a feedback loop in that way as we'd like. I would love an opportunity to do that and get the ongoing feedback, but not with this instrument. So, yeah.
I was trying to clarify before. You said everybody gets a piece of mail that has a link on it, or they can do it by phone?
Yeah.
Notes, right?
Yeah.
Have you guys tried anything other than mail, and you call them directly? Would that be active? Curious for our town.
You know what? We like to lead with the paper survey, and really, I've never asked the contractor why we do that, but yeah, that's just kind of historically what has been done, and then the follow-up phone calls. But so that's a really great question. I should take that back to them and see if there's another method. Yeah.
Question and a statement. How long does the survey take? So is it
So I have received a survey, and I was elated to get my own survey. I would say you could easily run through it in maybe 20 minutes, but it's a commitment. If you really want to sit and think about it, you could easily spend 30 to 45 minutes really digesting it. Yeah.
So then to the question, so in Louisville, we've just done a survey that was about 20 questions, about 5 or 10 minutes to complete, and our 311 call center has actually been trained to call out proactively to citizens about our citizen satisfaction survey. But 20 minutes might be a little bit long to be able to stay on the line, and they're not professional surveyors, but they've been trained by a local survey company to do this in a way where the surveys are designed by this company so that it reduces some of the cost to the city for doing this continually. It's been relatively successful.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's a great method. So, anything else on administration? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I know you're challenging people surveys before, fascinated by this notion you talked about a perception gap. Have you developed questions that sort of test the perception of your constituents? In terms of, you said you had some objective measures, and yet you're asking for their satisfaction, and these are ways that you can test their perception in terms of drilling down.
So are we testing perception as well? Yeah, I think the whole surveys are perception. We do have a lot of service level metrics to measure everything objectively in other ways. I actually think that a lot of these questions are objective. And then we do ask some questions that are very high level, community oriented questions that are all about like your perception of Kansas City as a place to live and work and play and so forth. All right, well, I will move on. So I guess I wanted to address a little bit about where you could potentially get your initial questions for a survey. And I'd be interested to hear from Louisville also about where they got their questions. But we started out just by asking other cities, what are you asking? What should we ask? And we still do that. We always, if we're going into a survey revision, we ask for the contractor to send us what are the other clients doing, and they have a lot of the big city clients. So we try to adjust. If we find a question we really love, we try to insert it. Recently, third bullet down, we've been working with some university professors on and releasing the survey data to them to do research. And so we're in constant dialogues with them about, what would be helpful for your research moving forward. Our questions fall into 3 real big buckets. So community-wide, Kansas City is a place to live, work, do you feel safe, that kind of thing. City services, obviously those are the things that the city is providing. And then some of my favorite questions are actually about experiences with the city or with the community. And I'd really like to take just a moment to talk a little bit about those experiential questions, because again, I think they're some of the most powerful things we have on the survey. So on the back of the survey, there's this box, and I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to read. But they ask things like, have you used X service, so bulky item pickup? Or do you own a cat or a dog? That's a question we recently put on there. Have you been a victim of a crime? Do you recycle? There's a whole bunch of different things on here. And we can look at those trends over time, and that's kind of cool. I would say that these don't move very much. And when they do move, we pay a lot of attention because something is happening in the service if we see an experiential question going up or down by any statistical significant increase or decrease. It kind of comes really into my work when we start looking at those users versus non-users and the satisfaction levels there, because we treat those a little bit differently. So in a lot of cases, users are more satisfied or they can be polarized. And so you would treat a user group a little bit differently than people that say they have not used the service. And we've seen in services like community centers that the use and the trend of satisfaction, they go together. So if people stop using our community centers, well, their satisfaction is going to start going down as well. So we deal with those things differently, and the experiential questions lets us crosstab in that way. So experiential questions are, as I said, really sacred to us, and so we don't change them very often. But recently we've made a couple of big changes or additions. I call these big changes because, again, they've been very stagnant over the last 10 years. But We added the do you own a cat or a dog? We thought maybe that would tell us something about animal control. I don't know. And sometimes we put a question on the survey, honestly, just to see what happens. And so this is kind of one of them. We want to see what's going on. We also figured we can layer it with records of pet licensing as well and just see where those line up. Have you had contact with a police officer? This is a direct reaction to what's going on in the country. We have the question, are you a victim of a crime? And as you would expect, are you a victim of a crime? Yes. Well, you're less likely to be satisfied with the police department. But what we wanted to know was, if you've had contact with a police officer, was that a good thing or a bad thing? And then we're going to see how that goes over time. We've gotten our first quarter results back, and I'm excited to get back and dig into that. Last box here, we deleted this question. Did you vote in the last municipal election? Again, that was a question we had on the survey a long time. We would periodically do some crosstabs by it or maybe look geographically just to see civic participation. But the thing is, voter turnout records and rates do not at all match this. There are more people who self-report that they voted, the real optimists of life. Yeah, I voted, totally, who actually didn't. And it could be that, they just forgot. Well, was that in the last year or was that 2 years ago? And that's fine, but we feel like it was an invalid question because we weren't getting honest answers out of people. So the tip here is, if your yes responses are more than could possibly be true, that question's probably not good for your survey. So then to take it back to the satisfaction questions away from experiential, when to consider deleting a question. So again, we don't do this lightly, but there are some cases where deleting a question or a series of questions just makes a lot of sense. This was a series about safety, and I think at the time it served a really strong purpose. But are you safe at home? Are you safe at home at night? Are you safe in your neighborhood? Are you safe with a mouse, with a house? It just didn't really get us anything, and no one was really paying attention to the data because there were so many questions. So we consolidated those up into just these two questions about feelings of safety in the city and how safe you feel in your neighborhood, which freed up some real estate on the survey to put other questions about other city services. I see folks from our health department, and we were able to put a whole section on the survey about health because we did this kind of stuff, deleting questions that weren't being used. And I always looked at the people who said they felt safe in parks at night in an urban environment, and I wondered about what they were doing in parks at night. So I did not want that question on the survey anymore. The other kind of test to put questions through, and what we always put our questions through, is can we get the same type of data, or can we get more relevant data anywhere else? Some of these are, we can get participation in adult athletic programs. All the athletic programs have user surveys anyway. We thought that was more relevant. Smoothest of city streets, we have a street condition index, plus we ask about maintenance questions. We thought we could get at that another way. Visibility of police in retail areas, I have no idea why we were asking that. So we always put them through, what are you going to do with this data, and can I get the data somewhere else? And if the answers to those are nothing and yes, then the question goes. So the questions that are core to our survey, obviously infrastructure, neighborhoods, fire police, trash and recycling, people love trash and recycling, and parks questions. We also try to be reactive, again, to what's going on in the community. So recently there's been a lot of efforts at making our streets and our sidewalks more accessible for people with disabilities. So we added that question a couple of years ago. We also want to be able to geographically look at that to target our scarce sidewalk infrastructure resources. And as I said, we added a health department section that can help them get at different things going on in the health of the community. So just being responsive to the needs of the community. The purple box down there at the bottom, physical appearance of your neighborhood, I'm really excited. We just added that. And we think that's going to layer on top really nicely with our code enforcement efforts and our property violations, and just help us get a little bit deeper into what's going on in neighborhoods. So selection of the questions and getting buy-in. So we at one point had this section on the survey that was just gigantic. And it had everything from street to infrastructure to water sewer line breaks, maintenance of downtown, maintenance of city buildings. I mean, all like capital infrastructure stuff. But because it was lumped into one section, the departments that maintain those things were not as engaged in the survey. I'll get to a slide where I show how we prioritize and what we do with the survey in that way. And we were prioritizing things against each other that were not on the same level and definitely were not on the same capital need level as well. So we did some revisions, we split some stuff out, we created a couple of new sections. And what happened is we got buy-in then. You know, we asked the departments, well, where do you want this question? We moved this question about mowing and tree trimming because it used to be in that section, and then it even carried over into a more street sidewalks, street lighting, street signs section once we had even done these revisions. But they weren't, it was very low on the priority chain in that section, and the service was being provided by the Parks Department, while all the other things were being provided by the Public Works Department. And while I don't like silos, when it comes to prioritizing departments' budgets, sometimes you have to do some siloing in order to get buy-in. So to go a little bit more into the ranking, we ask people, you know, not only are you satisfied with the service, but we ask people, what would you like us to emphasize? We figure if we're going to send out 9,000 surveys, we want to get back some feedback about what they want us to actually do for them. So on those major categories, it's kind of at the top of the survey. Those are all the major service categories. What are your top 3 priorities? And then each individual section, like neighborhood services, health, parks and recreation, street infrastructure, you can choose 2 of those. And what that looks like is a table like this. So the importance percentage there, so this is for our Parks and Recreation section, so they were able to choose 2. So the percentage there of importance is the combination of people who chose parks or one of these services as their 1 or 2 choice. Then satisfaction is obviously the satisfaction rate, and we do an importance times the inverse of the satisfaction to get this, what we call our IS rank. And this is just a methodology to help us start looking at things in some sort of order. And like I said, that mowing and tree trimming along city streets, when it was in the infrastructure section, was one of the lowest priorities. When we put it in its kind of proper place, where it's being maintained by the Parks Department, it shot to the #1 priority. And what that translates to is 2 years in a row, that service was on the chopping block in budget discussions, and we took this table and we said, no, this is a high priority for our citizens, we cannot cut it, and it was saved. And I think it will continue to be saved. And actually this year, youth athletic programs and tree trimming have flipped. So you better believe this year during budget, I'm gonna be like, we need more youth programs, people, and the table shows it. So I think this type of ranking has been really valuable for us because it's, again, saved programs, it's helped us understand what things are actually at the bottom of the list too. You know, maybe those are things we don't need to increase funding or we don't need to do anything with. They're doing okay. We can also take that, and this is a new thing we started doing, and look at it geographically. These are our council districts. We have 6 councilmatic districts. This is the ranking within those council districts. And you can see #1 priority across all of them in the infrastructure section is maintenance of city streets. So that's, you know, to be expected. But then you start to kind of scatter. And we color code it like this just so we can see it a little bit better. I'm just curious if anybody can tell me which council districts are the oldest, have the oldest infrastructure. Can anybody look at this and tell me which ones are the oldest council districts? Three, 4, 5, and 6. Yes, so everyone wins. 3 and 5 are our oldest. And 3, 4, and 5 are our oldest. 3 and 4 specifically. You can tell because sidewalk and street infrastructure, highly condition of sidewalks in your neighborhood, those 2. But really, what the kicker is snow removal on residential streets. Districts 1 and 2 are our suburban design. So those are the cul-de-sacs. So they're really unhappy and they really want us to prioritize snow removal on their residential streets after maintenance of city streets, of course. But yeah, when we saw this, we were like, right, that makes total sense. Sidewalks in our urban core and our like older infrastructure, snow removal where there's a lot of cul-de-sacs. So, I mean, again, we've just started to explore this methodology. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know if we'll even be able to make the case to target by councilmatic district. You know, that's a hard sell. but maybe. I think that's where we'd like to go. So a citizen survey is not going to be good news. I said earlier that we don't want to pump sunshine. So we know that there are services that we just either are not doing well, or that we've just got a big enough problem that it's really hard to move the needle on citizen satisfaction. One of those areas is our neighborhood services, code enforcement, weed abatement, condition of housing. We are an old city, and we have a lot of old infrastructure and neighborhoods and housing, and some of those houses are falling apart because of disinvestment, because of a lot of other factors that all cities go through. A lot of industrial cities understand this. We've got a lot of vacant properties, abandoned, dangerous buildings. The problem is real, and it shows up on our citizen survey, and so we know our citizens aren't happy about this, but we've made performance improvements in our code enforcement operations. We've tried to be transparent. We've tried to impact those neighborhoods, provide resources, connect people with resources to take care of some of their housing issues. But we know in this area, we may not ever move the needle unless we invest in a huge way, knock down all the dangerous buildings, reinvest in a lot of other things, the schools, crime. I mean, this is a big issue, and we can see it right here on the citizen survey. So the other thing about a citizen survey is sometimes it takes you places you didn't know you were going to go. So if you give an analyst a citizen survey, they're going to want more surveys, which I did. We started talking with departments about citizen satisfaction, and they started pointing back and saying, well, I can't deliver that service because my fleet's always down, or I can't hire quickly enough, or I don't have the tools and equipment, or I need handheld devices in the field, or so on and so forth. Everything pointing back to anecdotes, pointing back to service delivery issues from our internal survey or internal services departments, those services that are providing the services to the external departments. So we said, all right, we're going to do an internal survey and survey all employees about these services. So we sent this internal services survey about IT and fleet and hiring and other issues. And we found that there were some issues with those, and those have been incorporated into department business plans, and they've started making big leaps forward in trying to improve those scores. We've got that survey out again right now. But we did it, and we asked a loaded question, an open-ended question, which was new for us. And it just said, what are the barriers for you to provide the highest quality service possible to the citizen? And what came back were work cultural issues, big cultural issues. So we said, okay, we got to do another survey on employee engagement. We need to do an environmental scan to find out what's actually happening in our workforce and how we can tackle that. So we did an employee engagement survey last year. It has yielded some recommendations that are currently in implementation phase. A notable one is we have an alternative work schedule in pilot in 2 departments. We're going to see where that goes, but that was one of the issues that emerged from the employee engagement survey. And I mean, what an ideal situation is we fix some of those issues. That translates up into better service, both for our internal services and for the services to the citizen. So it's we do a lot of surveying in Kansas City, but it seems it's just a natural progression, and that's where we've gotten to. The other thing that, I said that the news isn't always going to be good, but sometimes the news is going to be great, and it's worth celebrating. So over the last 3 years, we've worked with our city communications team, who are just brilliant, and they have helped us parse out a couple of big data points that we want to highlight both to our city council and to our citizens, but also to our city employees who are making these happen. So 2013, we did something called the Big Five, which again, you can look up. It's kind of a cool event. We had city employees gather on the lawn in a park in front of City Hall and form a giant +5, and that indicated a 5% increase from one year to the next in Kansas City as a place to live. The Big 20 was the overall image of the city, the 20% increase over 5 years, which is a big, nice, steady increase. And then this year we did something called the Salute to Services, because we saw quite a few questions increase just across the board. So we wanted to thank our city employees for the work that they're doing to make all this happen. So you can see, police officer, parks, 311, our health department. So it's a great way to just continue the momentum, to tell people you appreciate the work they're doing, and then also to say to the citizens, we're doing something with this data. You're not just taking it, you're not just providing feedback that goes into a vacuum. We're actually gonna use it for something. And so I think just my last and my comment that I want you to walk away with is, a citizen survey, a survey is not the end all be all. We know that. We know that it's just one tool in our toolbox, but it is one of our most important tools, and we look at it as that outcome metric that we can look to when all else fails. We always have the citizen survey, and at least it will provide us some data to look at trends and priorities and all the other things that maybe we couldn't get anywhere else from cities data. So with that, again, I'll open it up for some questions, and then we can go have that glass of wine. Yeah?
This is incredibly impressive stuff. Really,
Thank you.
Copious notes for what we can do with Boston. But the question about how you react to changes in satisfaction data, how do you, if you see a big jump or a big drop, how do you actually try to get to causation methodology for
Yeah, I think it's on a case-to-case basis. So if we see a jump, one of the things that's the hardest, honestly, are the jumps up, because sometimes the mayor, every time we bring something that has a big jump up, he's like, what happened? What'd you do? Because I want to do it elsewhere. And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we know, there are some areas where we've really pounded the pavement. We've done a lot of work on that service, or we've done a lot of work on setting an expectation and communication with the citizens. And we still go up, and we go up and we know why. But there are other times we see bumps and we don't know why. Like that snow removal example, we know that's because we were doing a better job communicating. But sometimes things, Kansas City is a place to live, that just keeps going up and up and up. And the only thing we can really point back to is like the city's doing our part, the business community's doing their part, the Kansas City Royals are doing their part, and we've got community momentum behind that. When they go down, we then start digging into those service level indicators, mostly around timeliness. So are you getting your work orders completed in a timely manner? Are you doing your 311s in a timely manner? Things like that. So it's really then digging further down and figuring out. And sometimes we see things drop in one year and then go right back up. Quality of City Services did that a couple of years, or quality of customer service by city employees. The only thing we can pin it back to was we started talking about how the city was working on a customer service training and how we were going to be better customer service agents, and I think that set an expectation, and so citizen satisfaction went down because when they called us and we didn't provide better customer service, they were like, you lied to me. So but then over the last couple of years we've seen it trend back up. So I think it's a case by case basis but it's usually a deeper dive into other data. Yeah.
points of feedback that contradict each other. So like an extreme example would be if people say they want to reduce taxes, but in another question talk about increasing services, or is there a way to structure the questions so that people have a sense of some of those trade-offs?
We have not asked any very pointed questions about resources. I've seen survey instruments that I really like that ask the question, if you had to choose between this and this, what would you prefer? And I like those questions. We haven't done it yet. Again, kind of a survey real estate thing, but we do see some contradictory things, especially when we look at it maybe geographically. There's one neighborhood that has, or one zip code that we know we have a crime. We have a violent crime problem in that zip code. But when you ask them how safe they feel in their neighborhood, their satisfaction levels are higher than other places in the city. It's an expectation thing. It's a life thing. And those things always boggle our mind. So we see some contradictory things like that once in a while. Yeah.
Have you ever asked if they've taken the survey before? Because I'm wondering if they've taken it a second time and they're like, oh, you didn't fix this the last time I took the survey, thank you, and then they
We don't actually ask that. That's awesome. And we could probably get back to that by I could go into the master survey spreadsheet that's 60,000 rows and just try to match up the addresses. Because we send it to households, maybe not the same person. I made my husband take it a couple years ago, and I've taken it, he's taken it, so our household's taken it, and our opinions could be different. They better not be. But that's a really great point. We should do that. That'll be next CFA. I'll report back.
Hi, City of Austin Digital Inclusion Program. Taking a big residential technology usage survey that maybe don't have analysts, they're like online search partners or citizens or clients. I think we're still working on trying to figure out how to take this robust data set and find the key elements that are most useful to the community and how to package it up and share it for those people who don't know how to dig through surveys.
Yeah.
So how do you go through that process?
We spend a lot of time thinking about this, and especially as we roll the survey results out to different stakeholders. So all the way from, we obviously report to City Council, but we try to go out to the Chamber of Commerce and to other civic groups. And heck, I'd go out to a neighborhood group in a neighborhood in a living room and talk about the survey. But we try to distill it to the most base bullet point. This is what you need to know about this. Satisfaction with park maintenance went up this year. They did this, and this to make that happen. And so, but I think that's a struggle, especially if you have, we've got this kind of theory in our team, the more homogenous your crowd and the more the more understanding your crowd has, the less important data visualization is down here. But the more diverse your crowd gets, or the more, diverse is a bad word, but more, just the less knowledge, or the kind of the range of knowledge as you go along the spectrum, the more important that visualization is. And so we do spend a lot of time thinking about how we do that and how we make sure that we're communicating it in a way that's understandable for each stakeholder group. That's an answer, not an answer. So we're in the struggle with you. That's my answer. Yeah.
Sort of related questions. One around this, which is how do you communicate the relevant points of information to the stakeholders? Is it that different questions you just lump them together and present an aggregate view, just based on the data you think the stakeholder will be interested in? And the second around is questions do you or your vendor think around survey, just best practices in survey methodology, questions laid out, the questions in a different way and all that?
Yeah, so yes to your first question, we tailor, anytime we do any kind of presentation or we put together any kind of dashboard for any stakeholder group, we tailor it directly to them. We report to the Parks Board. Well, we talk all about park stuff. Police Board, it's all about the crime and safety and police effectiveness and things like that. And your second question you just asked, what was it again?
Just around question wording, you think
Yeah.
a lot around should we have negatively coded questions? Should we have different answer choices? Should they be laid out in a certain way on the survey, or is it a standard thing that you have identified as good and you stick to that?
Yeah, we do. We rely a lot on our contractor for that exact thing, to scan the environment and find out what else is being asked. And what he has a lot of, with the particular contractor we work with has a lot of experience with the wording and how that impacts. And we've seen a couple of times where we've reworded something for clarity. We had a question on there about catch basins, quality of, I don't even know. But we added a parentheses and said storm drains. Turns out people know what a storm drain is, but not necessarily a catch basin. So there's things like that, wording really matters in clarity. And so we go back and if we get a lot of don't know in a particular question or a section, it could be that the wording is the problem, that people just don't understand the question. So we kind of constantly put it to that test of do we think they understand it? Yeah.
I understand after what you were saying earlier is that we in Covenants we're really focusing on customer experience and making sure that we're delivering more than satisfactory experience for them.
Yeah.
And we have qualitative data that's saying we're successfully completing requests that they have, but we don't really know that we're successfully doing it until we have their feedback. So we've been really pushing that agenda, but we're getting a lot of pushback from some management. That's basically, I think, what the root of the issue is. I think that they're afraid to have to address the negative.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out how to get around that or how to spin it so positively that it's not really negative, or you're not really completing anything until you know that the customer is satisfied.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out how we can to address it basically without tiptoeing around it or ruffling feathers.
I think it just takes time, looking at the data over time. And then, of course, the buy-in for people who actually have to make the decisions. You're right. It's really hard when it comes back negatively. But I think you're on the right track with saying that the service isn't complete until you know what the citizen has said. And we not only do we the citizen survey, so that obviously is the random sample. With each service request through our 311, we send out either a survey card or a link or however they've engaged with us that allows them to give us direct feedback on that service request. And so we actually use that plus the citizen survey a lot. And that's kind of where I talked about that communication gap, where we might have really great ratings on the 311 service request and really poor, or on the citizen survey, or vice versa, where citizens' perception's pretty high, but then the actual service isn't doing what it says it does. But I just think it sort of takes time and constant, like, gentle talking about it and incorporating it into larger conversations about, the service delivery and so forth. So I know that's not a great answer, but we've been doing this we've been doing the survey for 15 years, and my group's been doing it, incorporating it into conversations about delivery for 5 years. And like I said, there's still places where it's still not receptive, or they're not as receptive to it. So it's a long journey. Yeah.
When thinking about whether or not to do a survey in your city, is it ever wise or useful to proceed with a survey effort if you're not completely sure you can address any of the negative issues that may come about?
Yeah, we've sort of come to believe, even though we were doing the survey back in the day without really having a structure to address it, I think that it's a chicken or egg. Having the data may then make the case for creating a structure to address things. So, that it just depends on the atmosphere of your community. If you think that having the data that says, hey, only 10% of people are happy, would then spur conversations about creating structures for making change, then that's where you need to go. But if you think it's going to just totally negatively impact, you have the survey and then that just backfires, then putting the structures in place to address it, whether it's some kind of performance stat program or some, any other methodology that you want to use. But I think it really depends on your the atmosphere in your community and what the community can handle and what your officials and management can handle. All right, anything else? All right, oh, yeah.
I think we need to follow up there. So we're trying where we want to get surveys out, we want to get more information. But you guys already were doing it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that caused you, I know you kind of talk about more and now you started digging into things, but what was it that you looked at? Did you look at the data, or did you just say, we just want to improve the surveys? Like, where did that tweak come in that kind of built momentum that led to that, further discussion?
Yeah, it really started with wanting to improve the services. And so the survey was sort of a symptom of that we had some services that were broken. And so the momentum was on that side. And a little background just on our office. We were born out of the 311 call center. And our office started initially just looking at that service level data and what we were doing and how we were timeliness and quality and completion rates and things like that. And that just sort of started building the momentum, and we started bringing that data back to people, and they started saying, well, that's not the full story. So then we started incorporating other data sets from them. And then the citizen survey was just sort of the layer on top of that. So I would say that we wanted to improve the scores for sure. We've definitely seen some really nice increases that make us happy, but really at the bottom of it was the service delivery. We wanted to make that better, and as I pointed out, sometimes that's also in the communication about it and providing citizens the information about the service. You can improve it really until it's world class, but if people don't know you're doing it, that's a problem, and we can see that sometimes in the survey. Does that answer your question? All right, well, thank you guys so much for spending this time with us talking about surveys.